But I'm going to mention Summer Institute of Linguistics, which you mention in the book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. You call it SIL, S-I-L. The Summer Institute of Linguistics. And I was horrified as I was doing my research to find out that they're still in existence. And on their website, they say, we are a global faith-based nonprofit that works with local communities around the world to develop language solutions that expand possibilities for a better life. SAIL's core contribution areas are scripture translation for you Christians, literacy, education, development, linguistic research, and language tools. In the book, you share, and I'm going to actually take a minute to tell the story that you share in the book. In the book, you share about their role in Ecuador, SIL, where they moved the indigenous people from their land into missionary reservations where they would receive free food. This is what they were telling them: move to missionary reservations because we will give you free food, shelter, clothing, medical treatment, missionary style education. They didn't call it missionary style, they called it education, good education, but it was missionary style education, under the condition that they all allowed oil companies into their lands. So SAIL missionaries used an assortment of underhanded techniques, claiming to be missionaries, but literally there to do the work of the corporations, to persuade the indigenous peoples to abandon their homes and move into the missionary reservations, even lacing the free food with laxatives. I'm being more assertive about this. You actually say allegedly in the book. You're not as assertive as I am. I'm assertive. I make no apologies. I'm going to be assertive because I'm certain, given the research and understanding these people, that they did do this. Even lacing the free food with laxatives and offering medicines to cure the diarrhea epidemic. The food baskets airdropped had tiny radio transmitters with receivers that had highly sophisticated communication stations manned by US military personnel at the army base at Shell in Ecuador, who tuned into these transmitters, and when a member of the community was bitten by a snake or became seriously ill, a SAIL representative all of a sudden showed up, arrived with anti-venom or the proper medicine, often in oil company helicopters. You give the example of the 5 missionaries who were killed by Ecuadorian revolutionaries, freedom fighters. In response, Rachel saying to the Mzungu woman in America, goes all over the media, and she's a sister of one of the ones murdered, and she's touring the US's and appearing on national television to raise money and support SAIL, which she claimed was helping the savages become civilized and educated, and Rockefeller funds SAIL. Given that little narrative, show us that picture in Africa. How is that being represented in Africa? Because these nonprofits are there saying they're helping our women, our children, but are they whispering in the ears of our people in Congo and displacing them so that oil companies can take over?
Well, yeah, and I can't answer that question generically. I think it depends on the nonprofit. And so, for example, I founded and am still on a board member of a nonprofit called the Pachamama Alliance, which works very hard with the to help the indigenous people in Ecuador defend their lands against oil companies and mineral companies. And we wait for them to ask for help. We don't go in and try to convince them of anything. And once they ask for help, for example, they need to hire lawyers to represent them in the Congress. We'll pay for the lawyers and so forth. And so there are nonprofits that do very good work. But on the other aspect of it is the nonprofit business can be used as a shield. And what you're describing that happened in Ecuador with Summer Institute of Linguistics is they were to a large degree funded by one of the Rockefeller institutions. Now, the Rockefellers also, particularly at that time, had huge interest in Standard Oil in companies, and so yeah, when their seismologists discovered that there was oil in a certain area that was controlled by the Warani or the Shwa or the Kofanis or some other indigenous group, SIL would go in and promise them great food, great living conditions, education, teach them to read and write if they moved to the reservation and abandon their land. And the oil companies could then come in and exploit it. I personally have not been involved in that in Africa. I'm not sure what's going on in Africa. I haven't done that research, but I'm sure it does go on. And I'm sure it goes on with nonprofits from many different countries, or ones that claim not to be part of a country, but to be international organizations. I also think there are good nonprofits that try to turn that around and do good work. And again, I can cite the one that I'm involved in, which primarily works in Latin America, but also it spreads programs around the world. I think we're in something like 90 countries now with programs called Changing the Dream, Awakening the Dream, or Changing the Dream, which is about transforming the death economy to a life economy. So I think again, it's not generic. You have to go in and look at each specific organization and really see what they're doing. So theoretically, nonprofits have to make their budgets public. And certainly if they're registered in the United States, there's ways to make them do that. And they should do that anyway. But if you don't feel it is, and really take a look at it, what are they spending their money on? And some of them are spending their money on good programs. Others are supporting big corporations. And some of the corporations themselves have formed nonprofits. And of course, they do this by saying, well, we want to help the world. So we're diverting some of our profits to the nonprofit. But in some of these cases, that nonprofit is supporting that corporation's ability to exploit resources.